What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actors loses his cool on one of America's most popular late-night shows? Well, that's exactly what viewers witnessed during what should have been a routine promotional interview on Jimmy Kimmel Live. The unexpected confrontation between Danny DeVito and Jimmy Kimmel left the studio audience in shock and network executives scrambling behind the scenes. Before I get into the jaw-dropping details of this heated exchange, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on the biggest entertainment stories as they break. The tension began building long before the cameras started rolling. Sources close to the production team revealed that DeVito arrived at the studio visibly agitated, complaining about everything from the temperature in his dressing room to the selection of refreshments provided by the staff. According to one production assistant who wished to remain anonymous, he was definitely not in his usual cheerful mood. Something was bothering him from the moment he stepped foot in the building. When DeVito finally made his entrance onto the stage, the audience greeted him with their customary enthusiastic applause. He acknowledged them with a quick wave, but observant viewers could immediately sense something was off. His typically warm demeanor was replaced with a noticeably stiff posture as he took his seat across from Kimmel. "Welcome back to the show, Danny," Kimmel began with his characteristic grin. "It's always great to have you here with us." DeVito nodded curtly, adjusting himself in his chair. "Yeah, thanks for having me, Jimmy." The interview started innocuously enough. Kimmel brought up DeVito's latest project, a dark comedy film in which he plays a retired hitman forced back into the world of contract killing when his family is threatened. The conversation flowed naturally as DeVito discussed his preparation for the role and shared some amusing anecdotes from the set. "I had to do some pretty intense physical training for this one," DeVito explained, gesturing with his hands. "Not easy at my age, you know. Had to work with a former military consultant who put me through the ringer." "I can imagine," Kimmel responded with a chuckle. "Did you have to do your own stunts?" "Most of them, yeah. The director wanted authenticity. There's this one scene where I'm climbing up the side of a building that took 17 takes. My knees were killing me by the end of it." The audience laughed, and for a moment it seemed like the interview would proceed as planned. However, the atmosphere in the studio shifted dramatically when Kimmel decided to broach a more sensitive topic. "So I heard through the grapevine that you and your co-star didn't exactly hit it off during filming," Kimmel said casually. "Care to comment on those rumors?" DeVito's face visibly darkened. "Not sure where you're getting your information from, Jimmy," he replied, his voice taking on an edge that hadn't been there moments before. "Oh, you know how it is in Hollywood," Kimmel continued, seemingly oblivious to DeVito's changing demeanor. "Word travels fast." "Maybe it would be better if we stuck to talking about the movie," DeVito suggested, attempting to redirect the conversation. But Kimmel, perhaps sensing that he had touched on something interesting, pressed further. "Come on, Danny. The audience loves behind-the-scenes drama. Is it true that you refuse to be in the same room as her unless absolutely necessary for filming?" The tension in the studio became palpable as DeVito leaned forward in his chair. "Look, Jimmy, I agreed to come on your show to promote my film, not to gossip about relationships that are being misrepresented by the media." At this point, Kimmel should have backed off, but instead he doubled down. "So you're saying there's no truth to the stories about you throwing a script across the room during a table read?" "What exactly are you trying to do here?" DeVito asked, his voice rising slightly. "We've known each other for years. I've been on your show multiple times. Is this really how you want this interview to go?" The audience grew uncomfortably quiet, sensing the growing hostility between the two men. Kimmel, attempting to diffuse the situation with humor, looked toward the audience and quipped, "Looks like someone woke up on the wrong side of the bed this morning." That seemingly harmless joke was the catalyst that set everything in motion. DeVito's face flushed with anger as he abruptly stood up from his chair. "You know what, Jimmy? I think we're done here," he declared, reaching up to remove his microphone. I came here as a professional to talk about a project I'm proud of, and instead, you're trying to ambush me with tabloid nonsense." Kimmel, clearly taken aback by DeVito's reaction, tried to salvage the situation. "Danny, come on. I was just having a bit of fun. We can move on to something else." "No, I don't think so," DeVito responded sharply. "You've made your priorities clear. 20 years in this business and I still have to deal with this kind of disrespect?" By this point, the studio audience was completely silent, watching the unfolding drama with a mixture of shock and fascination. The cameras continued to roll as Kimmel stood up, attempting to physically block DeVito's path off stage. "Let's not end things this way," Kimmel pleaded, his trademark confidence notably absent. "The audience came here to see you. We have several more segments planned." DeVito paused, looking directly into Kimmel's eyes. "You should have thought about that before you decided to ambush me with questions you knew would get under my skin. Did you think I wouldn't mind being blindsided?" The tension between them was electric, with neither man willing to back down. The production team could be seen scrambling in the background, unsure of how to proceed with this unprecedented situation. "I think you're overreacting a bit," Kimmel ventured, trying once more to defuse the situation. "These are just questions people are curious about." DeVito shook his head. "No, Jimmy. There's a difference between curiosity and deliberate provocation. You crossed that line." The studio audience watched in stunned silence as the confrontation between DeVito and Kimmel continued to escalate. The production assistants exchanged worried glances from behind the cameras, and the show's director could be heard frantically, speaking into his headset, likely conferring with network executives about how to handle this unprecedented situation. "Look, Danny," Kimmel said, attempting to regain control of the interview, "I think there's been a misunderstanding here. I wasn't trying to ambush you with anything." DeVito scoffed, his arms crossed tightly across his chest. "Really? Because it sure felt like it from where I'm sitting. You blindsided me with questions about personal conflicts you know I wouldn't want to discuss on national television." "Those questions came from a place of genuine interest," Kimmel insisted, though the slight waver in his voice betrayed his discomfort. "Our viewers want to know about all aspects of filmmaking, including the dynamics between actors." "There's a difference between discussing professional dynamics and digging for dirt," DeVito shot back. "And you know it." By this point, the tension in the studio had become almost unbearable. The audience, initially entertained by what they perceived as playful banter, now recognized they were witnessing something far more serious. Several people shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others leaned forward, captivated by the raw authenticity of the moment unfolding before them. Kimmel, sensing that he was losing both the argument and the audience's sympathy, attempted to pivot. You're right," he conceded, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. "Let's get back to discussing the film. I heard you did some of your own stunt work, which is impressive considering—" "Considering what, Jimmy?" DeVito interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. "Considering my age? Considering my height?" "Go ahead, finish that sentence." Kimmel swallowed visibly. "I was going to say considering the physical demands of the role." "Sure you were," DeVito replied skeptically. "You know what I find interesting? The double standard in this industry. When Tom Cruise does his own stunts, everyone calls him dedicated. When I do it, it's treated as a punchline." The host's face reddened slightly. "That's not what I meant at all." "Isn't it, though?" DeVito pressed, leaning forward in his chair. "Let's be honest with each other for once. This whole interview, you've been setting me up for jokes at my expense. The dressing room comments, the hints about on-set conflicts, now this." Kimmel glanced nervously toward his producers, who were making urgent gestures from the sidelines. "We should probably go to a commercial break," he suggested. "Oh, now you want a break," DeVito said with a bitter laugh. "Convenient timing." But Kimmel had already turned toward the camera. "We'll be right back after these messages with more from Danny DeVito," he announced with forced cheerfulness. As soon as the on-air light dimmed, indicating they were no longer broadcasting live. The studio erupted into frantic activity. Makeup artists rushed forward to touch up both men's increasingly sweaty faces, while producers huddled around Kimmel, speaking in urgent whispers. DeVito remained seated, declining the offer of water from a nervous-looking production assistant. His expression was stone-cold, revealing nothing of his thoughts as he watched the chaos unfold around him. After a tense minute of hurried consultations, Kimmel approached DeVito again, this time without cameras rolling. "Look, Danny," he said in a lowered voice that nonetheless carried to the front rows of the audience. "Let's reset here. I apologize if my questions made you uncomfortable. When we come back from break, we'll stick to discussing the film, your directing projects, whatever you want." DeVito regarded him silently for a long moment before responding. "You know what bothers me the most about this, Jimmy? We've known each other for years. I considered you a friend. Yet the moment those cameras turned on, you were willing to throw that friendship away for a few cheap laughs and a viral moment." Kimmel winced at the accusation. "That's not fair. I have tremendous respect for you and your work." "Respect?" DeVito echoed incredulously. "Is that what you call it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks an awful lot like exploitation." The floor director began the countdown, signaling their return from commercial break. Both men straightened, in their chairs, adopting neutral expressions that belied the tension still simmering between them. "Welcome back to the show," Kimmel announced, as the cameras began rolling again. "We're here with the legendary Danny DeVito, discussing his new film, Final Contract, which opens in theaters this weekend." DeVito nodded stiffly, his earlier warmth notably absent. "So, Danny," Kimmel continued, clearly treading carefully, "now, your character in the film goes through quite a transformation. What was it like playing someone with such a complex moral compass?" "It was challenging," DeVito replied flatly. "But that's what attracted me to the role in the first place. I've always been drawn to characters who exist in those gray areas, you know? Not entirely good, not entirely bad, just human. And working with director Sarah Jensen? I hear she has a very distinctive approach to filmmaking." DeVito seemed to consider his response carefully before answering. "Sarah is brilliant. She knows exactly what she wants and isn't afraid to push for it. Some might call her demanding, but I call it having standards." He paused meaningfully. "She also knows how to treat her cast and crew with respect." The implied criticism wasn't lost on Kimmel, who cleared his throat uncomfortably. "I understand there were some challenging shooting conditions for this film." "There were," DeVito acknowledged. "We filmed mostly at night, often in freezing temperatures. The entire cast and crew really pulled together to make it work." For a few minutes, the interview proceeded along these more professional lines, with Kimmel asking about the technical aspects of the film, and DeVito providing thoughtful, if somewhat terse, responses. The audience began to relax, believing the earlier tension had dissipated. That illusion was shattered when Kimmel decided to attempt a joke. "You mentioned filming in cold weather. I imagine that must have been particularly difficult for someone of your, shall we say, compact stature? Less body mass to generate heat?" A collective gasp rose from the audience. Several producers could be seen frantically making cutting motions across their throats, but it was too late. The words had already left Kimmel's mouth. DeVito's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Are you serious right now? Did you just make another height joke after everything we just discussed?" Kimmel's smile faltered as he realized his misstep. "I didn't mean anything by it, Danny. Just a little light-hearted—" "No," DeVito interrupted, raising his hand. "I'm done with the light-hearted jabs at my expense. I've spent decades in this industry dealing with the same tired jokes about my height. I've always been a good sport about it, laughed along, played into the stereotypes when it served the role. But I'm tired of it, Jimmy. I'm tired of being reduced to a punchline." The studio fell completely silent. Even the cameramen seemed frozen in place, uncertain of how to proceed. I think, DeVito continued, his voice now eerily calm, that it's time we had an honest conversation about respect in this industry, about how we talk to each other, about the kinds of jokes we consider acceptable. Kimmel shifted uncomfortably in his chair. This isn't really the format for... For what? DeVito challenged. For an actual meaningful conversation? For anything that isn't carefully scripted and sanitized for maximum entertainment value? God forbid we use this platform to discuss something real. The audience was enraptured now, witnessing something rarely seen on carefully produced late-night television, authentic, unfiltered emotion. Several people had surreptitiously taken out their phones, undoubtedly recording this unexpected deviation from the typical celebrity interview formula. "Look, Danny," Kimmel attempted again, his voice taking on a pleading quality. "I apologize. If my comment offended you, it was meant as a harmless joke, not a personal attack." "And that's exactly the problem," DeVito replied. "You don't even recognize when you're being offensive because these kinds of jokes have been normalized for so long. Would you make similar jokes about a female guest's weight? About someone's race or religion?" Kimmel's face paled at DeVito's pointed question about making jokes regarding someone's race or religion. The uncomfortable silence that followed spoke volumes. "That's what I thought," DeVito said, nodding slowly. "Some things are off limits, but somehow my physical appearance remains fair game." The producers were now frantically signaling to Kimmel from offstage, drawing a finger across their throats in the universal sign to cut the segment short. Kimmel cleared his throat, visibly sweating under the studio lights. "Perhaps we should move on to—" "No, I don't think we will move on," DeVito interrupted, his voice steady but firm. "For once, we're going to finish this conversation. Do you have any idea what it's like to walk into auditions and immediately be pigeonholed? To have your entire career defined by something you have absolutely no control over?" The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. This had transcended mere entertainment. They were witnessing a rare moment of genuine truth on television. "I've been in this business for over 50 years, DeVito continued. "I've won Emmys. I've been nominated for Oscars. I've directed critically acclaimed films. Yet the first thing most interviewers want to talk about is my height. The first jokes writers go to are about my height. Don't you find that a little sad, Jimmy?" Kimmel shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I never meant to diminish your accomplishments, Danny. You're one of the most talented actors in Hollywood." "Then act like it," DeVito replied simply. "Treat me with the same respect you'd show to any other accomplished actor on your show." A production assistant hurried onto the set, handing Kimmel a note. He glanced at it briefly before looking back at DeVito. "The network is suggesting we wrap this up," he said quietly. DeVito raised an eyebrow. "Of course they are. Can't have any real conversations disrupting the carefully crafted entertainment, can we?" "Danny, please," Kimmel pleaded. "Let's try to end this on a positive note. Tell the audience about your upcoming projects." "You know what? I think I've said what I needed to say," DeVito replied, standing up from his chair. He wasn't shouting, which somehow made his actions more impactful. "I didn't come here looking for a fight, Jimmy. I came to promote a film I'm proud of. But I'm not going to sit here and be disrespected, not even for publicity's sake." With deliberate movements, DeVito removed his microphone and placed it on the seat of his chair. "I think we're done here." The audience gasped collectively as DeVito turned and walked off the set, leaving Kimmel alone and visibly flustered. For several seconds, the host simply stared after him, seemingly at a loss for words. "Well," Kimmel finally managed, attempting to salvage the situation with humor, "I guess that's one way to exit an interview." The joke fell flat, met with uncomfortable silence rather than laughter. One of the producers rushed onto the stage, whispering urgently in Kimmel's ear. He nodded, then turned back to face the camera. "We're going to take an unscheduled break," he announced. "Stay with us." As the show cut to commercial, chaos erupted behind the scenes. Staff members rushed in every direction, some following after DeVito, others huddled around Kimmel, who had slumped in his chair, running a hand over his face. When the broadcast resumed several minutes later, Kimmel addressed the audience directly, his usual jovial demeanor notably subdued. "As you may have noticed, Danny DeVito has left the building," he said, attempting a weak smile. "While I regret how our conversation unfolded, I want to take a moment to acknowledge something important. Danny raised some valid points about respect and dignity in our industry." He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. "Sometimes in our pursuit of entertainment, we cross lines we shouldn't. Tonight was a learning experience for me, and hopefully for everyone watching at home as well." The sincerity in Kimmel's voice suggested these weren't just words fed to him by network executives, but a genuine moment of reflection. The audience responded with supportive applause. Danny DeVito is indeed one of our finest actors, and his work in Final Contract is truly exceptional. I hope that despite tonight's unfortunate turn of events, you'll all support his latest project. With that, Kimmel smoothly transitioned to his next segment. But the impact of what had transpired lingered in the studio. Something had shifted, not just in the dynamics of that particular show, but perhaps in the broader conversation about how we treat public figures and which aspects of their personhood we deem acceptable targets for humor. In the days that followed, clips of the confrontation went viral across social media platforms. Public opinion was divided, with some criticizing DeVito for being too sensitive, and others praising him for taking a stand against what they viewed as lazy, insensitive comedy. Neither Kimmel nor DeVito immediately released statements about the incident, allowing the unfiltered exchange to speak for itself. Industry insiders speculated about whether this would change the nature of late-night interviews moving forward, with some suggesting it might prompt hosts to reconsider their approach to humor at guests' expense. What remains clear is that for one brief moment, the carefully constructed facade of late-night television slipped, revealing the complex human beings behind the public personas we think we know. If you enjoyed this analysis of this significant moment in entertainment history, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to stay updated on all our latest content. What do you think about this confrontation? Was DeVito justified in walking off the set, or do you think Kimmel's jokes were simply part of the standard late-night format? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's continue this important conversation about respect and boundaries in entertainment.